Hello there, this is All 24 News, World News Program with me, Krimfat Zachary. Next up are your headlines. The United Nations has warned that the conflict in Ukraine has helped to fuel a global food crisis that could last for years. The eastern region of Ukraine has seen a major advancement of Russian troops as the latter marked its strong grip after the surrender of over 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers. A new video that begins moments before Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed has emerged, showing relative calm and quiet, contrary to the claims by Zionist officials that fighting was taking place in the area. And later on in our news, you'll be watching, according to an official report, the flood situation in Assam, which worsened on Thursday, with one more person dying and roughly 718,000 people in 27 districts still impacted. And finally, Australians head to the polls on Saturday with the opposition Labour Party led by Anthony Albanese. Hello again, those were today's top stories, and first we kick it off from Ukraine. In his evening speech, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that the armed forces continue to advance to liberate the Kharkiv region and described the situation in the Donbass as a living hell.
Ukrainian armed forces continue to make progress to liberate the Kharkiv region, but the occupiers are trying to further increase the pressure in the Donbass. This is hell. And this is not exaggeration. The shelling there is brutal and meaningless. There are 12 dead and dozens injured in a single day. All this has not and cannot have any military explanation for Russia. This is a conscious and criminal intent to kill as many Ukrainians as possible.
The eastern region of Ukraine has seen a major advancement of Russian troops as the latter marked its strong grip after the surrender of over 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers. The Russian-appointed leader of the Kherson region says the region will soon become part of the Russian Federation. The Russian army is preparing for a new wave in their military operation to expand to the center of Ukraine. After the surrender of more than 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers, Russia stated that the captured soldiers will be taken to a former penal colony in territory controlled by Moscow-backed separatists, while others will be hospitalized. The Russian Defense Ministry stated also that the troops are being treated humanely. Osama Ayadi in this report.
More than 1,700 servicemen of the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol have surrendered since Monday. Russian authorities said in what appeared to be the final stage in the nearly 3-month siege of the now pulverized port city. Several buses with Ukrainian servicemen were seen on the road leaving Mariupol overnight Thursday.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue to carry out a special military operation in Ukraine. Over the past 24 hours, 771 fighters from the Nationalist Azov Regiment have been at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. In total, since 16 May, 1,730 militants surrendered, 80 of whom were injured.
At least some of the fighters were taken by the Russians to a former penal colony in territory controlled by Moscow-backed separatists, while others were hospitalized, according to a separatist official.
Most of the patients are in serious condition. Almost all of them have multi-comminuted fractures with displacement. Many of the patients need prosthetics, osteosynthesis. Many have advanced wounds.
The Red Cross worked to register the soldiers as war prisoners in a step towards ensuring their humane treatment under the Geneva Conventions. While Ukraine said it hoped to get the soldiers back in a prisoner swap, Russian authorities have threatened to investigate some of them for war crimes and put them on trial, branding them Nazis and criminals.
Still with the Russia-Ukraine file, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visits his Dutch counterpart Mark Rutte and calls on Russian President Vladimir Putin to establish an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine. Olaf Scholz affirmed also that Russia is the only responsible for the block of grain export from Ukraine.
We clearly call on President Putin to end the war of aggression against Ukraine, agree to an immediate ceasefire and withdraw his troops. The killing must stop. Let's be clear. Russia bears the sole responsibility for this through its aggression and the fact that trade routes for the exports of grain from Ukraine are currently blocked.
The United Nations has warned that the conflict in Ukraine has helped to fuel a global food crisis that could last years. The World Bank, meanwhile, announced an additional $12 billion in funding to mitigate the conflict's devastating effects. Nabil Khazini.
When the war ignites, there will surely be people who will feel hungry. Before the war in Ukraine, around 60% of the world's undernourished people lived in conflict-affected areas. But today, more and more people around the world are in danger of living under the risk of food shortage, as Russia and Ukraine, that together account for nearly a third of global wheat supplies, are in conflict. During a meeting of the UN Security Council, Antony Blinken accused Moscow of using food as a weapon.
The decision to weaponize food is Moscow's and Moscow's alone. Don't take my word for it. Even Dmitry Medvedev, the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, former Russian president, recently said that Russia's agricultural products were, and I quote, its quiet weapon, end quote.
Russia, meanwhile, says it has its reasons. A senior official in Moscow later rejected the allegations, saying Russians were not idiots and would not export food while being subject to tough sanctions. China instead said all parties should comprehensively review food security issues, clear the blocking points, and jointly respond to global food security challenges.
Weaponizing economic interdependence will only create artificial difficulties and amplify local risks. We call for the lifting of unilateral sanctions and restrictions on food production and export as soon as possible, so as to stabilize and smooth food production and supply.
The ongoing conflict in Ukraine and resulting disruption to food, fuel, and fertilizer markets has worsened an existing food crisis and a global hunger crisis which is felt most by vulnerable people with limited capacity to absorb additional shocks.
During the UN Security Council, the permanent representative of Algeria to the United Nations, Mr. Mohammed Nadir Al-Arbawi, said that Algeria works to provide the necessary food aid to neighboring countries in Africa.
Mr. President, Algeria in this regard does not hesitate to provide the necessary food aid to neighboring countries in the African Sahel. Algeria is also working to achieve development projects that would improve the living conditions of people in the region and to ensure their food security.
The drought in Europe between 2018 and 2020 has set the benchmark for the droughts on the continent, according to the most detailed study of water shortage carried out to date. Spring 2022 has already been a very dry season for producers in Belgium. But it is not the only country in Europe affected by the drought. France is also expected to have the hottest May on record, pointing to a dry summer, as well as many other countries, marking the most intense drought in at least 250 years. US President Joe Biden says Sweden and Finland meet all the criteria to join NATO during a visit by Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson and Finnish President Sauli Niinisto to the White House. Hossam Burkan reports.
Joe Biden said Thursday that Sweden and Finland, whose leaders he received at the White House, are ready to join NATO. After speaking the Oval Office with the Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson and the Finnish President Sauli Niinisto.
Sweden and Finland have strong democratic institutions, strong militaries, and strong and transparent economies. and a strong moral sense of what is right. They meet every NATO requirement, and then some.
The American president repeated in the famous Rose Garden of the White House, decked out in the colors of the three countries, that the United States would work with the two Nordic countries to face any aggression, which they could be the object of during their membership process.
That we're going to work together to remain vigilant against the threats to our shared security and deter and confront any aggression while Finland and Sweden are in this accession process.
Swedish Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson said that the dialogue was underway with Turkey to resolve any issue.
And we are right now having a dialogue with all NATO member countries, including Turkey, on different levels to sort out any issues at hand.
In turn, Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg emphasized that NATO is also ready to respond to the concerns put forward by Turkey to block membership applications of Sweden and Finland.
Of course, we are addressing the concerns that Turkey has expressed, because when an ally, an important ally as Turkey, raises security concerns, raises issues, then of course the only way to deal with that is to sit down and find ways to find a common ground and an agreement on how to move forward.
By inviting the two leaders to Washington the day after their formal candidacy, the United States is once again showing its impatience to see the expansion of an alliance of which they are in fact the pilots. An expansion that resulted in a destructive conflict between Russia and Ukraine and will have severe repercussions in the near future, according to a lot of experts. While the vast majority of NATO members countries share this enthusiasm, Turkey is still threatening to block the whole process.
PKK-YPG terör örgütüne.
A new video that begins moments before Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was killed has emerged, showing relative calm and quiet, contrary to claims by Zionist officials that fighting was taking place in the area. The clip, which was filmed by a Jenin resident and verified by Al Jazeera, shows initial quiet with no sounds of fighting, corroborating witness reports that there was no clash between Israeli forces and Palestinian fighters at the time of the shooting, as the Zionists have suggested. According to an official report, the flood situation in Assam worsened on Thursday, with one more person dying and roughly 718,000 people in 27 districts still impacted. According to the Assam State Disaster Management Authority's daily flood report, one person perished in the Kanpur revenue circle of Nagaon district. In addition, 2 additional people have gone missing in Kanpur. U.S. President Joe Biden arrived in Seoul, marking not only the start of his first visit while in office to South Korea and Japan, but the beginnings of an economic initiative aimed at deepening the United States ties across Asia. Miriam Zian in this report.
U.S. President arrived to South Korea for the first time in his presidency, kicking off a high-profile trip meant to bolster ties with regional allies and launch a new trade initiative. During the 4-day tour, Biden will have an opportunity to reinforce partnerships with South Korea and Japan and reaffirm the region's long-standing importance to U.S. foreign policy to counter China's influence. The head of the White House is expected to unveil the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, an initiative to strengthen trade and supply chains in the region. However, the plan's lack of clear trade provisions could make it an uninspiring prospect for potential members, especially in Southeast Asia. Longtime allies Japan and South Korea are likely to be among the first to engage with the IPEF, as Singapore and the Philippines. Thailand has also demonstrated interest, while leaders in Indonesia and India have yet to take a clear position. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman criticized the plan, saying that the Asia-Pacific region is not a chessboard for geopolitical contest, and that China rejects small circles that smack of the Cold War mentality.
José Ramos Horta, the new president of East Timor and a Nobel Winner Prize, has pledged to strengthen connections with Indonesia and Southeast Asia, as well as Australia and New Zealand. On the 20th anniversary of the country's independence, he delivered a statement as he was sworn in as president. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Saqi al-Hamra and Polisario, the one and only representative of the Sahrawi people recognized by the UN, was created on the 10th of May 1973 by a group of young Sahrawi. Its creation will give rise to the crystallization of a mature nationalism, which will have to confront with very few means the occupying forces on their land, unifying the struggle of the Sahrawis. On this day of celebration, the Sahrawi people, their representatives and their leaders revisit the diplomatic success and victories achieved through so many efforts and sacrifices during 49 years of struggle. In the United Kingdom, the Metropolitan Police said they had completed their investigation into gatherings in Downing Street and Whitehall. Number 10 revealed on Thursday that the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson will no longer receive fines over his alleged breaches of lockdown regulations. The police said they had issued a total of 126 fixed penalty notices covering all 12 events investigated. Australians head to the polls on Saturday with the opposition Labour Party led by Anthony Albanese. The Liberal National Coalition government led by Scott Morrison has 75 seats in the 151-seat House of Representatives, one shy of the required majority to govern without crossbench support since the beginning of the campaign. Labour has led in opinion surveys, but the margin has eroded in the last week, and the party is plagued by its loss in the last election, in 2019, when polls incorrectly predicted it would win. To Canada now, it said it plans to ban Huawei technologies and ZTE core 5G gear use in an effort to protect national security, joining the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network. The decision had been delayed amid diplomatic tensions with China and after Canadian telecom companies already adopted to use other companies' 5G hardware. China expressed opposition to this decision, saying the alleged security concerns were a pretext for political manipulation. Inflation in Japan rose above the central bank's target to a 7-year high in April, the sharpest increase in March 2015. The country's core consumer price index, which excludes fresh food items, rose 2.1% from a year earlier. Experts say the hike in prices in Japan are due to the higher cost of raw materials, energy, and other commodities made scarce by the conflict in Ukraine. Law enforcement has completed gathering evidence at the supermarket in Buffalo, New York, where a young white man is accused of shooting dead 10 black people in a racially motivated attack. Tops Market's manager promised the grocery store will reopen as soon as possible.
The FBI has completed our evidence recovery operation, and we are releasing this solemn site back to Tops. We want to thank the community for their patience as we completed our work. Know that we understand the important role Tops plays in this community and the hardship that has been caused by the loss of access to this important resource. But our work must be thorough and methodical.
But the budget that I just proposed for 2022-2023 provides more resources to the Buffalo Police Department to protect this community, to protect our shopping areas, to protect our neighborhoods, to protect our schools that our children attend. And it is important that that budget with the resources for extra police protection be supported.
More than 30,000 people have been arrested under a state of exception in El Salvador, police said, as President Nayib Bukele's crackdown on armed gangs continues. Human rights groups say the detentions are often random, but the arrests are popular with the public who have been suffering from gang violence. In an unprecedented procedure in Argentina, a landmark criminal trial in the South American country has found the state guilty of the massacre of more than 400 indigenous people nearly a century ago. The judge said that according to survivor accounts, many children and elderly people died in the massacre, while those who were wounded and could not escape were killed in the cruelest form possible, with burials in common graves. The Oscar-winning Greek composer who steered a dashboard of synthesizers through the New Age and into the film and Blade Runner died at age of 79 in Paris hospital. Sofiane Kenturi in the following.
Lefteris Armas, the assistant of Vangelis, confirmed the death of most famously with melodic, otherworldly soundtracks for Chariot of Fire at the age of 79, without providing any specific cause. Vangelis began his musical career as songwriter and organist for the Formings, Greece's first popular rock band, which he established while still in high school. After the 1967 military takeover in Greece, he went to Paris and co-founded the progressive rock band Aphrodite's Child.
Music is not our property, it's a way to express things, and it's a code. And it's what makes the universe move.
The first studio feature of Vangelis was Chariots of Fire in 1981, and it won him an Academy Award surpassing John Williams' Riders of the Lost Ark, which is generally symphonic. With Blade Runner, he established his cinematic legacy by writing a big, glacially advancing epic for Ridley Scott's neo-noir sci-fi thriller, a box office flop that went on to become a classic and inspired 2017 successor.
With this music industry, and you have to be successful. You have to be successful. You have to sell records. You have to, because this is the only thing this is what they're looking for. They're looking sales. And they're looking to have people to be able to sell and to be successful and to become stars, whatever stars they are.
The soundtrack becomes the fastest-selling LP at the time, bringing Vangelis international fame. Its theme is one of the most well-known and parodied in the history of cinema music.
May he rest in peace. After 2 years of COVID-19 lockdown, Cannes International Film Festival returns this week for the 75th edition, with the 2022 event dedicated to rebuilding the film industry after turbulent 2 years. Sahra Frujani.
Following 2 years of pandemic lockdown, the world's biggest film festival is back to its traditional agenda and marking the return of parties and high hopes from the industry that will spark the return of audiences to movie theater.
Chacun est dans sa nuit.
The Cannes Film Festival immediately gave a political tone to its 75th edition by offering a platform from Kiev to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
We need a new chaplain who will prove once again that cinema is not silent. Of course, we will continue to fight, because we have no other choice than to fight for freedom, and I'm convinced that the dictator will lose.
The general delegate of the Cannes Film Festival, Thierry Frimaud, defended the festival's position on Russia.
Yes, we issued a press release 2 months ago, at least at the beginning of the war, to define a very precise and very clear position, which is no official Russian representation. That is to say, government authorities, a Russian government, which is the one waging war in Ukraine.
This year, 21 feature films will compete for the Palme d'Or at the annual festival, with other additions including Baz Luhrmann's highly anticipated Elvis and a plethora of chilling dramas starring Hollywood favorites like Michelle Williams, Lee Seydoux, Margaret Qualley, and more. Cruise is back in the Cannes for the showing of his movie Top Gun Maverick, based on 1980s film, and Tom Hanks is in a movie about the life of a singer, Elvis Presley. The prestigious film festival is celebrating Indian cinema. India has been chosen as the first country of honor at Marche du Cinéma. Indian star Deepika Padukone is a jury member.
I think cinema is such a powerful tool and such a powerful medium.
The winner of the event will be announced on May 28th, with Vincent Linden as jury president of the Cannes Film Festival.
Well, that's all We have for now. The news continue on our channel. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.